Welcome to Breakfast with the Broker with Steven Serle. So that's our secret handshake. That's all we got. So thank you for joining us, and we certainly appreciate all of you viewers that are out there.
Thank you for having me, Dave.
Welcome, Dad. So I know in the past episodes we've asked role models of our guests. And obviously, there's a lot of celebrities out there that people say, and a lot of people in the area. Well, my role model is my dad, so I'm excited and honored to have you on. One of the things that is interesting, tell us a little bit about your background, because obviously I know it, but a lot of people don't know it.
Well, without going back too far, I started in the real estate business in 1981, 37 years ago. Just like most of you, selling and listing real estate. I did that for about a year. Worked for a company called the Berg Agency, which was eventually acquired by Coldwell Banker. Worked for Coldwell Banker until 1992, when I decided to go to law school. Graduated law school in 94. Started RE/MAX Services in 1999, and the rest is history. Here I am.
Don't sound so enthused.
Yes. Okay. It's a good history. It's a very good history.
Yeah, I mean, you are being a little bit of a little modest, because there are a lot of things that you've done over in your real estate career, especially when it comes to you were an area vice president for Coldwell Banker. You helped manage several offices, and really there are a lot of people that are watching now that kind of say, hey, I owe it all to Steve. Not all, but they certainly are one of their role models. So let's get into today. Like the difference between what doing real estate today and what it was, maybe 20 years ago.
Well, going back 37
besides the
years
blue
ago,
books.
Yeah, going back 37 years ago, or even going back 20 years ago, the big difference between then and now is technology. Back when I started in the business, there was no technology. The only way to make a living in the real estate business was to get on the phone and knock on doors, send out flyers, do a lot of advertising. It was a little bit more even paced and not quite as quick as it is today, with technology being what it is. It was, at that time, we had the Boca Realtors, Boca Board of Realtors. We didn't have the Realtors Association of Palm Beach, which took in Boca, Boynton, Delray. They were all separate boards, and we all worked together. And I think the industry was, I hate to say more civil back then, but it was. It was built more on relationships and more on camaraderie. The attitude was always that the buyers are going to come and go, and realtors are going to stay, and those are the ones that you have to work with.
And one of the reasons for this Breakfast with the Broker, and then as you've seen some of our events that Rebecca Steinhaus has helped put on, is the social media extravaganza, and now the listing mastermind on on August 24th from 4 to 6 in the Polo Club. Those are things that we're trying to increase the professionalism within the industry, and we're also trying to increase the collaboration, similar to what the South Boca Board or the South Palm Beach Board was, and that's what we're looking forward to. You've got a lot of wisdom in the real estate world, and what I hear as far as reputation, and when I speak to other agents, they say, well, I really like that Steve Serle, because he's not like a normal attorney. He's like, he really
like an abnormal attorney.
He's like 100% abnormal, but he's like, he's an attorney, but he's a practical attorney. Let's kind of talk about how, maybe legalese or legally what the real estate market is today, kind of versus, what it was.
Well, when I first became an attorney, I used to joke around and say I got into the legal profession so I could screw up my own deals. But and that's kind of the old adage. I think a lot of people look at attorneys as deal killers and not deal makers, or putting deals back together again. But with my experience, 20 some odd years in the real estate business, selling and listing, and as a broker, vice president for Coldwell Banker, I learned a lot, and I knew what it took to put a deal together and to keep a deal together. And it's always been my philosophy that my job is to put deals together. I'm a closing attorney mostly, and that means that if I don't close, I don't do my job. If I get the job closed, then we did our job, okay? And it's to satisfy everybody's needs and wants. The buyer wants the house, the seller wants to sell a house. And it's our job to figure out a way to get that done.
Agreed. And, that's why, we lean on, agents, not just our agents, but agents that are outside agents. They'll call you for, just some advice, and, sometimes they pay for that advice, and sometimes they don't. But you're always willing to give it, and that's why our reputation is phenomenal, in the industry. Let's talk about a little bit of disruptors. That's the big topic, big trigger word these days. With I don't know if you saw, but there's an article with Zillow. Zillow Instant Offers are now called Zillow Offers. They just registered with the DRE in Arizona to be a brokerage, because they require. They're saying, Arizona is saying that they require Zillow to be a brokerage because they're working in somewhat of a brokerage capacity. How do you see the Zillows, the Redfins, the Open Doors, the Compasses, and all these other different companies that are kind of changing the industry? And for many people, they look at it, I think they're actually changing it for a lot of the good and not the bad, because now we are going to have to provide significant more value.
Well, I think that there's always been disruptors in the industry, in this industry, in all industries, that come in. Most of them come and go. The difference with Zillow is they're a huge multinational conglomerate, and they have the wherewithal to do what they need to do. But I've seen a lot of them come and go, and I think that right now, what's more important than anything else is the professionalism. And I think that the buyers and the sellers, those that are knowledgeable, those that have a little bit of smarts and that are intelligent enough, realize that you need a true professional to help you and guide you through the process. You can't do it online. You can't go ahead and say, well, let me do an inspection. I'll go ahead and find my own inspector. Well, what does this mean? What does that mean? Somebody's got to tell you what everything means as you go along the process. And that's why you use a realtor, and I think that's never going to change. We've had discount brokers come and we've had discount brokers go. I can name probably a dozen discount brokers that are no longer in the business, and everybody thought that they were going to be true disruptors, but where are they now? The Alan Bushes of the world, and some of the other ones, the for sale by owners of the world, they're nowhere to be found now. So I think that Zillow is going to have its place, but I think it's going to be a stepping stone. I think a lot of buyers and sellers are going to use the facilities to find the property, and then they're going to call a true professional or a realtor in order to help them out and get them through the process.
I was speaking to a client the other day, and that client, and it's more to your point, that client said, I found your property on Zillow, and I said, well, why didn't you call the agent, the talking heads, the three talking heads on the side? And they said, because I wanted someone who actually knew the area. So, I think the rhetoric is changing a little bit with Zillow, because they're starting to realize that Zillow is not accurate. It just isn't. It's not. It's a testament to real estate professionals in our areas. But anybody, any Joe Schmo can pay $3,000 a month and be that talking head next to a 33487 zip code. That's that doesn't make you a specialist. That doesn't make you a professional. It allows you to get some leads. And in all honesty, it's very confusing to a consumer. Consumer goes online and they look at it and they go, well, are you the listing agent? You're not the listing agent? So, you know,
Sure.
it really is somewhat deceptive in some of their advertising. But that being said, they're here to stay. They're not going anywhere, and they're a huge outfit, and it's something that we have to be able to, you know, provide value to those buyers and sellers.
You know, speaking to that, and this is a quick story. I was looking for some property up in the northern part of Florida, and I happened to go into Zillow, and I found a property that looked very, you know, appealing. Okay, it looked like something that fit my parameters, but I couldn't tell whether it was a single-family home or a duplex. Because it said it was, I think, 3,100 square feet, and it was on the ocean, and it was really nice. So I went ahead and I wrote the realtor on the other end, and you know, a little note saying, "Hey, is this a duplex or is this a single-family home? Here's my phone number. Call me." And I got a reply back. Okay, I really don't know. Was the reply? I'll find out for you. Okay, I'm like, you know, your name is there, your picture is there. Okay, you're representing yourself as being maybe the listing agent or at least somebody who's knowledgeable about the property, but you don't know whether it's a single-family home, and this is in your area. You don't know whether it's a single-family home or a multi-family home. And that's what you get with Zillow, and I think people will begin to realize that, and eventually, you know, they'll have their climb, and maybe they'll increase by 20% every year, and then 5 years down the road, who knows where they'll be? They
Sure.
may not be here anymore.
You know, and it goes to preparation. I mean, if you're gonna buy into something like Zillow, make sure you're prepared. Make sure you know the areas, the school districts, the parks, the beaches, how far it is from certain things, and you know, and that goes into the professionalism in our industry. And I encourage everyone to really just start to prepare. If you're gonna sell in an area, make sure that you prepare and know that area, because that's a perfect story. One of the so going on, you know, as we look at the next 3 to 5 years, and you know, real estate market is very strong right now in South Florida, and you know, I think there are many factors to it. But you know, what do you see in the next 3 to 5 years as far as potential growth, potential things that you know are going to happen in that next 3 to 5 years?
I think, contrary to popular opinion, you know, everybody's talking about a bubble, a bubble, a bubble. I think that's way off in the future. I think you've got to understand that right now there are a lot of baby boomers out there. Okay, probably the highest percentage of the market in real estate is baby boomers. And a lot of them are going to get to that age where they're going to be looking for assisted living facilities. So there's going to be a lot of properties, a lot of inventory on the market. Okay, you're going to have a lot of the millennials that are going to finally realize that they're better off owning than renting. Okay, and they're going to be picking up those homes that are being sold by the baby boomers. I think you're going to see a surge in the market in the next 2 years like we haven't seen in years. And you know, again, contrary to popular opinion, I don't think the bubble's going to hit us for at least 5 to 10 years down the road.
Okay, great. Last thing, I want to touch on contracts. A lot of agents don't necessarily fill out contracts correctly. What would be some advice to agents, whether it be new agents, experienced agents, you know, think that they know how to write a contract? You know, give us a little bit of advice on writing, you know, because we standardize, obviously, the contracts, and we typically use the FAR bar, you know, but what advice would you give as far as contracts?
Well, I think the biggest advice I'd give is to, you know, make sure that every blank that's on the contract is filled in. Those blanks are not to be left blanks. There's a reason for them, okay, and that's a number or a date or something that needs to be filled in, whether it be the seller's name or the buyer's name. I think what I'm seeing today a lot of is a lot of probate property, because a lot of the baby boomers are getting to the point where they're no longer here, and their heirs are starting to try to sell the property. But know before you go ahead and put the property on the market that it's actually saleable, because if it's still in the name of the deceased and it's not in the estate's name, then nobody really has the right to sell that property at that particular point in time. And a lot of us will say, well, you know, just have the son sign it, just have the daughter sign it. Well, that's not going to hold water, because if you get to a closing and one party wants to back out, you don't have a valid contract. So know that you have a valid contract, you know, every once in a while, and I'm sure Dave will let you know when it's available. We have contract classes, and you know, at no cost, we'll teach anybody how to fill out a contract, some of the pitfalls to look out for, some of the things that you need to be really aware of, and you need to make your buyers and your sellers aware of. And we do that usually 4 or 5 times a year, and it's right here at the RE/MAX office. So, and anybody's welcome to come by and just, you know, attend, and hopefully you'll learn something.
Yeah, I mean, we do give a lot of practical knowledge. I'll tell you, you know, 2 of the things that, you know, you've taught me, and that we've passed on to, not, you know, tons of agents, you know, in our area, is one is make sure that everything's been signed, initialed, and delivered prior to the time of acceptance date, or at the time of acceptance date. And the second thing is make sure the HOA disclosure or condo disclosure has been signed or initialed, and or initialed prior or at the time of contract. I think a lot of times people, agents don't do that, and you know, there's not an issue until there is an issue. And we've seen it where, well, what do you mean? You know, the buyer was paying cash, and we get all the way to the end, and now the buyer all of a sudden wants to back out and goes seek legal advice from an attorney and gets his money back. You know, so you know, it's very important to have some of those pitfalls. I know in a lot of the states, you know, they have attorneys that draw up contracts, and you know, and unfortunately or fortunately, they allow realtors to do it, and you need to make sure that you prepare. Listen, we do a very good job in listing and selling real estate, but we need to also do a very good job in writing those contracts, because that's as important, if not more. You know, more important.
Absolutely, because you can do all the work and then not end up at the end zone, you know, which is the closing.
Absolutely.
Because you forgot something, or something wasn't there. And it's a good point you mentioned about the time for acceptance. There is a provision on the front of the contract that calls for the contract to be signed, sealed, and delivered by a certain date. And if you go past that date, the signature, for example, let's say it's August 25th is the acceptance date, and the signature says August 26th, you don't have a contract. You have an invalid contract at that point. Either party can void the contract and cancel it. The buyer can cancel it and get all of his money back. The seller can cancel it and sell it for a higher price if he wants.
Great. I guess one last thing. So what's the difference, or why do you recommend using a FAR/BAR contract versus a FAR contract? Are there a couple provisions in there that allow you, you know, kind of make you lean one way or the other?
Yeah, I think the FAR/BAR contract was put together by attorneys and realtors in conjunction, and I think it's a much more thorough contract. It protects the parties better. There are provisions for prevailing party attorneys' fees in there. There's greater protection for the realtors in there. And there's a greater chance that we'll actually close. And I think that most realtors today, in their listing agreements or in their MLS sheet, actually have provisions in there that the only contract that the seller will accept is a FAR/BAR contract. And I think that's very prudent.
So, you know, I keep saying one last thing, but you know, it's not often I get to interview my dad, so I certainly will ask him a couple questions. You know, when we talked about Zillow and we talked about some of these others, you know, it seems like the trend in the market now is that a buyer is going on different portals, different sites, and they're seeking out the listing agent. Is there a recommendation, you know, because listen, you know, you've always taught me he or she who owns the inventory owns the market. And one of the things that people do is, you know, they want to get, you know, more and more listings. However, you know, there are buyer's agents, there are buyer's representations. Do you, when you, what would be an objection or something that you could say when a buyer is seeking out a listing agent and the buyer's rep is trying to get that buyer?
Well, you know, it's kind of it's a situation when the listing agent is also the selling agent, where he's trying to. And I use the term very loosely, represent both the buyer and the seller. It's very hard to do. Okay, his relationship is with the seller. The seller is the one that he knows for a month or a week or 2 years or whatever, however long the listing is. And that's the one he's been dealing with. So as a buyer coming in cold, it's quite natural that they're going to go ahead and push harder for the seller than they are for the buyer. That's why in a lot of cases you are better off finding your own agent, somebody who's going to work for you, somebody who's going to, you know, zealously try to protect your interests.
Sure. Well, Dad, thank you very much. This is Steven Serle to everyone else, but it's Dad to me. So Steven Serle in the office, Dad at home. Anyway, I want to thank everyone for tuning in. We have a great next episode next Tuesday at 9 a.m. with Kevin West from the West team, shorts and all, because that's his brand. And he's going to talk to us about how he sells luxury property and such. So we thank you very much, Dad. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next week. Have a great one.